All right, we're going to continue our discussion in Chapter 11, Social Psychology, by looking at attitudes, and then we'll move into pro-social behavior. Your attitudes are your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions about anything under the sun. It's not just having a bad attitude. It's a lot more than that. We have a lot of beliefs, a lot of opinions about how the world works, about how people are, what they do. And psychologists are interested in these attitudes for two basic reasons. One, we want to know where they come from, what leads you to develop and hate and love and believe the things that you believe. And secondly, as we've noted over decades of research, your attitudes are very good predictors of why you do what you do. Well, let's start first with the question of where did they come from? Well, our earliest experiences, things like what mom and dad teaches us, the early exposures to men and women, to toys, to kids, to games, to TV, basically early direct experience can begin to teach and mold us in certain belief systems. Once we begin old enough to identify with peers, with parents, with other groups, we begin to copy them, and we don't even just how they dress and how they talk and how they walk, but also what they believe, what they stand for, what they're into. And of course, we live in a world of mass media, television, games, music, TV, internet, various versions of that. We have the capacity to absorb those messages, and we'll get into some of those a little bit later. So little by little, day by day, since you were born, you've been absorbing information about how to think, to act, to feel around things in this world. That's part of the question of why you believe what you believe. Well, we're asking where did it come from? But I told you psychologists are mainly interested because of we can use your attitudes, your thoughts, your feelings to predict behavior. Ultimately, psychology is about understanding why we do what we do. Now, to be fair, for me to use your attitudes, your belief systems to predict behavior, I need three things. First, the attitude has to be strong. If I ask you, do you like Italian, and you tell me, meh, it's okay, well, then that's going to be difficult for me to use that attitude to predict your eating habits in the next year. You've basically said it doesn't matter. You don't feel strongly enough about it. You need to have that passion, that desire behind that attitude, good or bad, to help us really accurately predict behavior. Secondly, you have to be aware of the attitude to understand why you believe what you believe. Many of us have absorbed attitudes, belief systems from mom and dad and teachers and pastors and civic leaders, and maybe we replicate them, we say them, we act that way, but we've never actually stopped and considered why. It's those beliefs, those ideas, those feelings that we understand, that we try to figure out, that we try to wrap our heads around, and ultimately come to a conclusion that, yes, this is mine, and this is why I believe those. Those are the strongest, and they tend to be the best ways to predict behavior. Third and finally, you have to have a vested interest. Even a strong attitude may not be an important attitude. For example, if you tell me I don't like this actor, I don't find him very funny, that could be a strong attitude, or it could seem a strong attitude, but it may not be powerful enough to keep you from seeing another movie that happens to have that actor in it, right? Because in the scheme of things, it's not a very big deal. Versus if you say, I believe this about politics or religion or some hot civic social issue, that might be a vested interest in those beliefs and therefore a better predictor of your behavior. Well, so far we've been saying attitudes can predict behavior, but can your behavior predict your attitude? The short version is yes. There's the possibility that I can observe your behavior and determine from that what you believe, what you feel, what's your opinion about things. Unfortunately, as many of you know, humans are quite good at believing one thing and behaving a different way. And that actually has a name, cognitive dissonance, a common phenomenon, and I think an important one for you to know, much like the fundamental attribution error previously. Because once you learn this, you'll start to see, not only in your own life, but other people's lives, how we use this phenomenon, or rather try to escape this phenomenon. Cognitive dissonance just means that when you have two thoughts, or a thought and a behavior that don't mix, so you believe one thing, you act a different way, it creates an actual physical reaction. We feel bad. We feel uncomfortable. Let's say in sort of a classic racist or prejudiced example that I believe this group of people is bad, they're lazy, they're wrong, they're mean, they're violent, whatever. I believe this group is bad and I don't like them. However, let's say in life I meet someone from that group and I like that person and I want to be their friend and I enjoy spending time with that person. That can create a very unpleasant feeling because my brain says, no, you don't like this group, but here you are behaving in a different way. That's cognitive dissonance. And so the important part of this is what I'm going to share with you now, the ways we make that dissonance go away. How do we make that bad behavior go away? Because that's going to say a lot about our behavior and a lot about why we do the things that we do. All right, so let's use that example. I don't like a group of people. I don't like your group of people, but I like you. Well, how do I make that feeling go away, the bad feeling? Well, maybe pie in the sky, I actually change my attitude. I change my behavior. I say, you know what? I was wrong. I believed this all my life, that this group was bad, but I realize it's made up of individuals, and I will treat them that way, and I will change my behavior. Well, does that happen? Sure. Does it happen a lot? No, because it turns out it's very difficult to change our behaviors, to change our beliefs, especially the longer that we've had them. So how can I make this bad feeling go away if I don't like the group you belong to, but I do like you? Well, I can do what's called adding a consonant thought. Let me share with you one of the more common racist phrases I heard growing up. It goes like this: he's one of the good ones. You see what I did there? I put a little footnote, a little asterisk, and I said, you know what? That group of people is bad, and I still hate that group of people, but you're an exception to that group of people. Now I can go on hating the group and still spend time with you. Third, you might make it go away by saying there's an amount of perceived choice. You reduce your hand in it, your stake in it, your control of the situation. Let's use a different example. You're driving on the highway and you see someone on the side of the road and you truly believe that person's in need, but you don't stop. So your belief and your action don't mix. How do you make that bad feeling go away? Well, we say things to ourselves like, I would totally stop and help, but I'll be late for work, and I can't be late for work because I have to provide for my family, and my boss is really mean, and they don't understand that situation of me being late to help someone. It's out of my hands. If it was up to me, I would totally help you, but I can't do anything about it. And finally, at least for the examples I'm giving, this change of importance. It's kind of the weakest one, but basically what we do is we just push down that dissonance and say, you know what, in the scheme of things, it's not as important as others. So you see a commercial about starving children, and you truly believe these children are starving and that they have a problem. And the commercial says, send us 25 cents a day, we will feed this many children. And you say, I hope they get fed, but I'm not going to give them money. Well, if you believe they're in need but you don't help, you might feel dissonance. Well, how do you make that feeling go away? You reduce the importance of the thought. You say, you know what, it's a serious problem, but I've got to feed my children, and there's problems in my community, and there's problems in my state, and there's problems in my country, and I got to take care of all of those first, and then we'll get to the other countries. Now let's talk about attitudes, about dissonance. I've been talking about you sort of figuring out what you believe and making those actions match those beliefs, and if not, then trying to cope with it. Let's talk about changing someone's beliefs. And if you've ever taken debate classes or communication classes, you might be familiar with some of the stuff we're talking about. There's 4 variables for changing someone's mind that you have to consider. First, you have to consider who's delivering the message and who would be the most effective. If it's medical information, should it be a doctor? Should it be a celebrity? Should it be a teacher? The medium is how are you going to deliver the information. Am I going to give a lecture to you? I'm going to make a video about it. I'm going to make a music video. I'm going to publish a paper. I'm going to draw a picture. Like, how am I actually going to communicate what's important to you to change your mind? Third, I have to ask, who's the target of this? Am I trying to change a group of 10-year-old kids that change their mind? Am I trying to change the minds of a group of 65-year-old retirees? It's a very different audience. And finally, the actual message. What information should I bring to the table that will be most effective at changing your mind? If there are people, individuals or groups that you believe you want to persuade to believe differently, you have to understand these variables and use the right ones at the right time. Now, what's our best success rate? What's the best way to ensure people, or the largest number of people, will believe what you have to say? Well, that depends on 2 important variables. And by the way, this is called the elaboration likelihood model. What's the likelihood you will actually change my mind? And it goes like this. If the people you want to change minds are actually educated or informed about the topic you wish to change them, then you have to use the central route. This means I'm directly presenting information, I'm using logic, I'm using the data, I'm using the numbers, I'm saying this is what I found, this is why you should believe this. However, and this is where things get unfortunate, sometimes sketchy, sometimes unethical, If your audience doesn't have the education about what you want them to believe, they don't understand the topics you're about to talk about, you could use the peripheral route. Peripheral means on the side. It's all the stuff that's non-message based, Who's my celebrity speaker? Who's the person that I'm going to bring to the table? What kind of music will I use? What kind of emotions? What kind of heartstrings will I tug on? Think about those political commercials we talked about in the previous chapter, right? If you don't understand the issues they're mentioning, then the scary music and the black and white photos and the broad statements about candidates will work on you, right? Because you don't have that information. So they go right for the emotional manipulation. Well, this lead talks of persuasion, talks of attitudes, and really let's move to a more positive topic in the concept of pro-social behavior. Some of us will go out and do things that help people with no clear benefit for ourselves, and that's called altruism. The idea that I unselfishly helped you, that I helped you not expecting anything. There's no evidence that I will get some sort of reward or praise. I simply did it because I believe it's the right thing to do. That's altruism. Now, there are some psychologists who argue that maybe there's no such thing as total altruistic behavior. And it's at least interesting food for thought. I mean, think of it this way. If I donate to a charity and no one will ever know that I donated, I know, and it makes me feel good, right? If nothing else, at a biological level, dopamine and serotonin increase. I feel good about what I've done. Well, in that case, maybe I have been reinforced. I have been stimulated in some way. And you know what? That's fine. They're not to say that this isn't altruism. You're not still doing good things. They're just making the reference that, maybe if nothing else, we're actually wired to do good things, that we have a real biological response for attempting to do things to help other people. Now, whether or not you fall on one side of the fence or the other, realize that altruism in general is the idea that you weren't expecting or did not understand that there would be a benefit for you. It was clearly helping for helping's sake. That's very different for egoism, which is I'm helping because I expect something. I expect a reward. I expect praise. Or if nothing else, I expect you not to judge me because, hey, look, I did a good thing. So you don't want to be censured by society for not doing the right thing. But those are selfish reasons. Those are not selfless reasons, which would define altruism. Now, if you buy into the notion that maybe there's at least some biological sliver of us, some biochemical part of us that is actually wired to help other people, then we can answer some of these questions from an evolutionary point of view. Now, I put the question up there, does altruism exist in other species? Are humans the only one that can be altruistic? There does seem to be some evidence that not only primates, but some other mammals have shown evidence, and even non-mammals have shown evidence of helping others, other animals, even other species when there's no clear benefit. We're not talking about like symbiosis or an instinct to protect, like bonding or imprinting on a child and mother. We're talking outside of those norms. There is some evidence to support this. Also, if you put on your evolutionary psych hat and you say, well, if behavior is about adaptation, why is it adaptive to help people? I mean, after all, shouldn't we be selfish and keep the food for ourselves and our family, and we get to make babies, and that's reproduction? Well, if you look at human history, both prehistory and now, it turns out that humans are quite a bit stronger, quite a bit better when we do help other people. We do work together. We do form communities. That seems to have given us or at least one of our dominant places on this planet and ecosystem. Now, why are some people more altruistic than others? Well, for some of you, you just have a happier mood. We find that happier people tend to help people more often. But the good news about this, and what I find interesting, is it works backwards, too. If I ask you or even force you to help other people, make you volunteer, make you do good things, you're more likely to see an elevation in mood. So your mood, your emotions will go up because you help someone. It creates this nice feedback loop that actually may increase your chances of helping people in the future. Sometimes people are more altruistic because they are more empathetic, whether through education or perhaps even through a biological predisposition. They more easily understand other people's problems even if they haven't directly experienced them, and maybe are more likely to help out. Also, the culture, the community, the family that you grow up in plays a big part in how altruistic you will be. For example, cultures with market economies, meaning I produce just a few things, you produce a few things, and we can swap those. We can depend on each other to survive in this culture and community. We're more likely to help each other. We also find that communities with clear moral guidelines, whether that's formal religion, civic laws, codes of conduct, moral guidance, are more likely to engage in pro-social behavior. If you've wondered if there's any difference between men and women, the answer is typically no. We have the same capacity for altruism, the same capacity for emotional response, as we talked about in a previous video. However, social context does provide, some direction. For example, men are more likely than women to stop and help someone on the side of the road. Well, if you look at that, you may say, aha, men are more altruistic, but that's just not true. It just turns out culturally, the context is men are more comfortable in that situation, whether it's that men are more comfortable with automotive repair based on cultural interest. Maybe it's that men are more comfortable because women are more likely to be physically assaulted, in the context, or at least that's the idea, that's the fear that we have, the stranger on the side of the road. So I can see why those numbers change based on context, but it doesn't mean men or women are more helpful or less helpful. It just sort of depends on the situation. And finally, media, which again is a pretty broad word, a pretty easy word, but it can mean a lot of things. The TV that we watch, the books that we read, the music we listen to, we've been intaking messages since we were little kids. Some of those messages are pro-social, how to help other people. Some of them are anti-social. The world is dangerous. The world is scary. Those people are out to get you. Those people are out to kill you. Don't step outside your comfort zone. So the more and more you're exposed to different points of view, depending on which way those points of view are leaning, you may find yourself absorbing those attitudes, the same attitudes that you find on fiction and nonfiction programming. Last but not least, I want to end on, basically it's a sad point, but it's something worth discussing when we talk about altruism, and that's the bystander effect. Because it turns out the more people that are around you, the less likely you will help someone. That's probably because of the diffusional responsibility. We say to ourselves, well, there's enough people, someone will get it, I don't need to be responsible. And sometimes that has incredibly tragic byproducts. And I've given you an example here from 2009, though sadly every year there's a couple of cases that are similar, men and women who are physically, sexually assaulted. Basically, crime is being committed on their person. Dozens of people are watching. No one lends a hand, no one calls, no one helps out until the crime is over. So we do have the capacity for help, but there are roadblocks that may keep some of us from being altruistic, from being heroic, from being helpful in a social context. We're going to stop there. When we come back, we're going to return to social discussion by looking at aggression and move into topics like prejudice and discrimination. See you then.